It's the Final Word World Cup Daily. Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon for CBUS Super, making your hard work pay off. Not just Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon, though. We've got Olivia and we've got Alf.
Yep.
On the couch with us. We're at the Sunday Racing household. Barat and Isha have looked after us tonight. They're fed us. We've been watching England take on Sri Lanka on the telly box
and we've
at the
got
City Cricket Ground.
A couple of the largest dogs that you've ever seen. So
Yeah,
if you're
so
listening
on YouTube,
if you're listening to this in an audio medium, it's not going to add a lot
to
to
this.
your experience.
Licking the thing.
That is Ollie trying to sniff the microphone. But if you're watching this in a visual medium,
darling.
you can
There
see
you go,
the biggest
sweetheart.
polar bear
yeah.
dog of all time, just hanging out behind us. Got some treats? Yeah, you want a snack, don't you? Go on. There we go. These guys have been watching Sri Lanka and England with us, and shall I tell you about it in the space of 30 seconds?
I wish for you to do that.
Okay. Let's say it was a game where basically the same thing happened in both halves. Fast start, slow finish. England batted second, Sri Lanka batted first. They were 72 for 1 at one point after 8 overs, and then it all went really slow, slowed down through the middle by England's off-pace bowlers, and then Mark Wood picks up a couple of wickets in the last over of the game, 3 all up. And then Sri Lanka, the same kind of deal. England was 75 off the first 7 overs, and then it really slowed up with the Sri Lankan spinners, and England nearly buggered it up. They nearly didn't qualify for the semi because they just slowed up towards the end, and Ben Stokes was there to just sort of chip it around and get them there with a 40-odd not out.
Yeah.
Just 141 they had to chase. Nearly buggered it.
Needed 7 in the last over. I thought we were going to see Bravo and all the rest of it, but they held their nerve. Stokes.
Thanks, Alfie.
Managed to
putting his giant
justify
butt in my face.
his worth. I mean, I say justify his worth. At some point through the tournament, England have always said that it'll become clear why Ben Stokes is there, because on numbers alone, and you can see why people make this case. But, it's hard to see how he fits because he's not necessarily bowling his full complement of overs, and he's not batting in a manner that where it looks obvious why he's in the best 6 or 7 batters that England can put on the park.
Played a lot of T20 cricket for England,
Sure.
and he's never made a 50, which stood out when you look at the career stats.
Yeah, that's right. Nass made this point on telly that at some point his worth would be shown. Sorry, I'm just juggling a glass of water and the 2 dogs.
Never work with children or animals, isn't that the
exactly.
idea? Well, we've had Winnie on our show, and now we've got a couple of the biggest dogs you've ever seen.
And then he was able to absorb that pressure in the last 5 overs. When wickets were falling, ultimately he had Chris Wokes for company at the end, and Sam Curran briefly before that. Curran top edge and gets out, I think, in the penultimate over. So it was a close run thing. They win with 3 balls to spare. But I think that if you were an England fan watching that, you would have had a number of moments in that chase where you thought, boy, are we going to stuff this up?
Indeed, we watched the game with a number of England supporters who had exactly those
That's
moments.
right. Our England colleagues from the BBC are out here with Test Match Special. We were watching it here with Baz and with Isha, and it just felt like, I guess they were reflecting the pressure of the situation on a pitch that was used. I think there's a bit of context here. So the fast start with the hard new ball makes sense. It also makes sense that it would tighten up when the spinners came on, and Sri Lanka used 4 of those. England used 3. I expect it was probably quite dewy out there as well, which meant that the seamers got a bit of extra assistance towards the end of the innings, which was notable.
It just seemed like a pitch that there wasn't any pace in, so it was hard to hit through the ball later in the innings.
That's right.
And so it was about having a player who was set, who was able to deal with it, and that was Patan Nasanka for most of the Sri Lankan innings. The key point really is Adil Rashid getting him out in the 16th over, I think it was, just before the last push, and so at that point they've got new players in, and they don't have that set player, and Nasanka was the one who scored quickly and who seemed at ease out there, and Kusal Mendes helped put on a good opening partnership with him. And then after that, it was pretty much Nasanka doing it for himself.
Well, it was only one other player for Sri Lanka made it above 20, and that was Rajapaksa, who's meant to be the finisher and meant to go at strike rate of 150 plus. I think he was the only, if I remember the pre-game preview pack that I made adequately, maybe 21 days later I've forgotten some of it, but I'm pretty sure Rajapaksa is the only Sri Lankan to have a strike rate in the 130s over the last 2 years. And he got 22 from 22. So it reflects how it did tighten up. Adil Rashid was player of the match for taking 1 for 16 from his 4.
Yes, more of that. Let's have bowlers getting rewarded rather than just whoever made the most runs.
Exactly. So, they didn't use Moeen much, but he bowled 1 tidy over. Liam Livingstone bowled 3 overs in the middle there as well, mostly of leg spin, a couple of offies when it suited, because you can change it up from one to the other. So they read the pitch and the conditions well to really drag it back. Alex Hartley said at one point they're only going to get 140 here, and she was spot on. They got 142. That one, earlier on when I think they were 75 in the ninth over or something like that. You're like, well, they're laying a foundation that could get them 180 odd, and that would have been a hell of a chase.
Eight overs in, they were Sri Lanka were 1 for 72, and 7 overs in England were 1 for 75. Yeah. I mean, they both had those starts, but it was also the variability with England. So they were pace off. It was mostly good death bowling from Sam Curran as well. So the spinners did a job through the middle. Curran did a job towards the end, but then Mark Wood comes on as well and goes, I'll be the point of difference. I'll do the full pace. Picks up a wicket in the 18th over, picks up 2 wickets and effects a run out in the 20th over. I mean, just an outstanding finish. And so instead of getting 155 or something like that, they end up with that 141. And it's almost enough. I mean... Yeah,
just on Wood, just to come back to him, we hear a lot about, from the analytics types in T20 cricket, big driver of the conversation, that when briefing players who go around a bit in their first over, they try and remind them that they can still win the game. Now, Wood had 17 taken from his first over in that eventful power play. Then he went off the ground briefly. And I'm not sure if it was for a wee or a niggle, whatever. But you can form the argument. At that point, you're like, well, maybe he's not going to play a role in this match, but comes back, doesn't bowl again. So he bowls over, was it 2 or 3, and not again until right at the death. And he had a big impact. So that's a lesson about not sort of losing your bundle as a bowler inside the power play, knowing that there is still an opportunity for you to win the game. Adam Zampa actually said it a couple of weeks ago when they lost to New Zealand. He's like, we need to know that as a bowling group, you're allowed to get smashed around for an over. That's just the nature of T20 cricket.
Sure.
And Sam Curran too. Sorry, you mentioned his death bowling.
Yeah.
That's the second night in a row we've seen class death bowling. We spoke a lot about Afghanistan last night and the way that
Naveen
Al-Haq especially, but great support there from Faruqi. That's right. Yeah. And tonight, Sam Curran at one stage hit the tram tracks 4 times in a row. One of them was hit, but the other 3 beat the bat. I know Sam Curran is an interesting kind of case study, isn't he? In a guy who's come through the short form system, played Test cricket, but these days seen more as a white ball cricketer who can do a number of different things. We've seen in the IPL he's opened the batting. He's got excellent hands. He's got great arm. He's very athletic. He's pretty resilient. Hasn't bowled loads and loads this year, but in a major tournament, very competitive kind of kid. And he isn't that quick. He hasn't got loads of slower balls, but I don't know. There's something about Sam Curran. And again, that's a bit cliched to say that he's got
that X factor. He's got that X factor,
but he does. There's criticism of him sometimes that he's not quick enough. He doesn't move it enough. But for some reason, he's super effective, and that's mostly because he's accurate. He lands it where he needs to land it.
And equally with the bat, there are times when he has the ability to influence a game. Maybe it's partly to do with having the self-belief, thinking that he can do that. So, and then Sri Lanka, it's a similar story. Butler and Hales off to a good start. I mean, Hales plays well again. He's had a couple of good innings in his last couple of outings, which seems significant for England. Just backing away, so basically turning the line of the ball into the line that he wanted, not the line that the bowler wanted, and he was able to, say, back away and then hit down the ground. He wasn't backing away and trying to slash through the offside. He was in a very controlled way hitting down the ground.
Bizarre dismissal too. The caught and bowled Hasaranga, one of his 3 wickets. It came off the cue end of the bat, went straight back to the bowler. I mean, it's very rare that it would go in that angle. I mean, ordinarily the ball would spit out to point when that happens or something like that, or go straight in the air, but not go directly to the bowler in their follow through. Right. And Hasaranga takes the catch. And that's after a brilliant catch in the deep to get rid of Joss Butler. That was when he's on 28 from 23, and that's Karan Ratner, the seamer, doing the work out there. And that's a clutch catch, because in the Butler played some searing drives in the over before that. And as we know, once he's in, he's the best player in the world when he's really properly in, near enough to it. So, they get those 2 wickets and the whole game changed.
And it's spin again, because it's Tikshana, it's Hasaranga, and it's Dhananjaya De Silva through the middle. The way that they're able to put the brakes on is significant. And the other thing that's significant is that David Malan tweaked a groin, if you will. He had a groin strain while he was fielding. He was running to field the ball, nothing untoward, and he had to go off the ground. And so he didn't come into bat where he was carded. He was bumped right down the list and ended up not batting at all. So England are effectively 1 down regardless. They lose Butler, they lose Hales. Hasaranga picks up wickets through the middle, and suddenly they're in trouble. And they've got Lahira Kumara playing the same role, the Mark Wood role, coming on and bowling a couple of good overs of really quick stuff as well. And so they've got that balance of the proper pace and then all of the pace off spin kind of stuff. So they made England crawl and they made England sweat. And there are points where it looks like it should be a stroll, where England needs, say, 35 or 40 kind of configurations. And they still managed to make it very, very close. They got there with 2 balls to spare in the end with Ben Stokes and Chris Wokes at the crease, but they really looked like they were going to bugger it up multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, the middle order for England has just not fired through the tournament. Moeen Ali, 1 from 5, poor dismissal. It looks like catching practice, doesn't it? Harry Brook hasn't fired a shot in the competition as yet, really, or not a meaningful one.
Hits one back to
Dhananjaya, who gets in the book and gets in the game. And then there's the dismissal of Liam Livingstone, who's yet to get really set, tries to hit one out of the SCG, doesn't make it beyond about 15 metres inside the rope at long on.
And that's Kumara with that extra pace, where Livingstone goes, instead of trying to go back and flog the spinner over mid-wicket, I'll go back and try to flog the quickest guy in their team over mid-wicket, and where does it go? Straight up in the air.
So, they're heaping pressure on whoever's set at that point, and so it was with Ben Stokes. So, again, we started with Stokes, but he ends up with 42 not out from, I'm not sure how many balls he faced, but it was 36 balls, but that wasn't really a factor by then because they were ahead of the required rate due to what they did inside the power play. It was never like, even though it felt like squeaky bum stuff, the WinViz said 90% with 5 overs to go. The lived experience was it felt tighter than that, but what they're doing there is they're saying, well, Stokes is the algorithm, I assume, is saying Stokes is in, and the run rate required is about 6 or 7 and over, with 5 wickets in hand.
He didn't do 2019 Ben Stokes stuff. No. He didn't go back and hit boundaries. He didn't cut anything into the crowd.
He hit 2 4s.
Yeah, he hit 2 4s in the innings, and the rest of it was just, okay, well, we need to run a ball, so I'll tuck it around and do that. And Sam Curran was with him for a little while, but then I think fairly enough tried to hit a boundary late to try to ease some of that pressure, and he ends up top edging it down to. Was it deep fine leg or was it deep third where he got caught? Either way, just inside the rope there. Really, really good catch from a high ball that almost carried for 6. And so it's Chris Wokes who has to come out, and he ends up hitting the winning boundary behind point in the last over.
Yeah, that catch from Kumara off Curran, you can kind of see high in the sky that gets spilled probably 6 times out of 10. But did well to keep his cool. It was a bit of a bobble there, but it kept it in his guts, as it were. He kind of dragged it in towards his tummy as he hit the turf. And they used Lanka for an over right towards the end, which I thought made sense. Like,
spin was working.
Tishana
he bowls filthy off breaks, and why not?
Yeah, Tishana had 22 from his 4. He could have had a couple of wickets twice.
He nearly got one caught at cover that went just wide of cover. Yeah. The short one that was slapped through cover. And
Tishana, early on inside the power play when England were going, both Hales and Butler had balls go over the top of their middle stump by like a centimetre. Neither of them were gloved by the keeper, which says a bit about how much zip was coming off the surface with that Karen ball he flicks out so effectively. So, Sri Lanka they played their best card, which is their spinners. And
those are balls where if that had hit the front pad, you would have given it out.
Sure.
It looked like they were hitting the stumps, and somehow they cleared middle stumps. So sometimes when we see the DRS projection and we say, there's no way that ball's clearing the stumps, there are balls that would be clearing the stumps that you don't expect to.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, they gave themselves every opportunity. I think Sri Lanka will look back at this competition now. They were eliminated before tonight, but now they're finished as one where they get out of the group. Of course, they won the Asia Cup only a couple of months ago, so higher expectations on them than there were 12 months ago. But they get out of the group in tough circumstances after losing to Namibia. It feels like we watched a lot of them. You know how we've discussed how Netherlands and Ireland might be sort of tiring towards the end. I don't think that's the same for Sri Lanka because they're more conditioned to playing lots of cricket. As a country that gets more tours and thus a congested schedule, they'll be much better for this experience as they were last year. And they've been on a steady rise the last couple of years. They've got the Lanka Premier League in position now for I think 2 seasons that they were absent a high-level domestic T20 comp for a number of years. They've got players getting picked up in the IPL for the first time in a relatively long time, including Hasaranga, who's an absolute superstar. So, plenty of positives for them, even if it never really looked like they were going to make the semi-finals.
So that's the second last day of the group stage. We've got one more big day tomorrow, which is Netherlands play South Africa first up. Then Pakistan play Bangladesh. If either of those teams win, they could notionally still make it. if there's a loss from, say, India or South Africa.
Yes.
And then you've got India playing Zimbabwe, which, net run rate and all the rest of it. But roughly, if Pakistan win, then India have to win.
No, that's exactly it. That's all it will take. That run rate won't be a factor. Because
but I mean, if Bangladesh won, they'd be level on points, but their net run rate's behind India.
Bangladesh are too far behind to make it interesting unless South Africa lose. Where it could get fun is because Pakistan's net run rate is already ahead of India's. So
yes.
if they win, by definition, their run rate will remain no worse than it is at the moment.
But theoretically,
if
Bangladesh had a huge win and India had a huge loss, then maybe they could go past them.
Right, yeah. But I guess the greater probability of an upset tomorrow is where if Pakistan get the job done and India, we mentioned it 2 days ago, 90,000 people are going to hit the MCG. Attendance was poor again tonight. At the SCG, of course, it was poor at Adelaide Oval for the game we were at between Australia and Afghanistan. But 90,000 tomorrow at the G, which will be exciting. We've got the semi-final in Adelaide between England and
whoever
India
finishes
confirmed.
top.
Oh, sorry, it's England and India as of right now, but it could, of course, change. But if whoever finishes top of the group, because we know that New Zealand will get the Sydney semi, and Australia, of course, are now out, so the Australia factor doesn't weigh into it at all. So New Zealand against the side that finishes second out of the group tomorrow, and
that's it.
And the other side will play against England.
The final word, Hall of Fame. It is that time. It's brought to you by CBUS Super. That's a company that looks after your savings in retirement so that you can have a nice, happy retirement. That's a thing that we have in Australia, cbussuper.com.au. If you want to go and check them out and see if they can help you out with your finances. They have a great track record over nearly 40 years. Delivering good returns. So you need to remember that past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. So what's your Hall of Fame for the night?
cbussuper.com.au. I know, David Milan. So when he did his groin, I think England fans had probably a shared experience because the angle the television cut to, his head was bowed, and it was very difficult to immediately tell who it was. It would have been you could have identified 4 or 5 people,
right?
And my instinct was to go, Hales, no. Then there was a second player. Livingston.
No, Livingston.
Hales, no. Livingston, no.
Wokes.
Milan.
Yeah.
Oh, you beauty. That is to say, there was a gratitude of sorts, I reckon, for England fans that it was Milan, the maligned Milan, who it was that tweaked the groin, and not either Livingston, who they were assuming they were going to need to go big in the chase at that stage because the run rate was quite high for Sri Lanka, or Hales, who was going to be opening the innings. So a bit of an insight to the mindset of England fans who have never quite settled with the idea, I think, of Milan being the anchor.
Yeah.
And the configuration...
It's hard being the number 1 T20 batter in the world when nobody thinks you're any good.
Yeah, I guess it's a quirk of the system, the role he plays. Because I'm not saying that Milan shouldn't be here, by the way. It's just that he hasn't had the public with him, I suppose you could say. But if he doesn't get up for the semi, the adjusted side presumably will... thrashed it out with Daniel Norcross before. Phil Salt will come in.
But Stokes will do the Milan job,
exactly,
which he did tonight at 3.
Precisely. I reckon it'll be, same openers, and Salt and Stokes would be 3 and 4 depending on the circumstances, and it may very well be that they are a more explosive side for it. The challenge, as we saw with Cameron Green last night, not playing a competitive game for 3 weeks and being thrown into a World Cup semi-final isn't an easy thing. Ask Pete Hanscom about that from the World Cup semi a few years ago when he came from nowhere to play. There'll be other examples as well. It's not he hasn't got the same day in, day out experience that these players have had since.
The same as Steve Smith and Cameron Green coming in for Australia last night, and both making no runs. So my Hall of Fame, I think, was the fact that after the game, Alex Hales had made 47 off 30. He was the player they wanted to talk to on TV. Who was doing the interview? Owen Morgan. He's until recently captain or not. He's captain for England because Hales couldn't get in the team under Morgan. Now that Morgan's gone, Hales is allowed to play for England again. And they were having a very civil discussion. Yeah, and doing a pretty good job of it as well. So for all that's happened in the Alex Hales story, and a lot of it's pretty ugly, he's making this chance count as a 33-year-old. He's the guy that made the first 100 for England in T20 cricket all those years ago at the 2014 World Cup, and he knows what it is to be in big tournament play. So he's an asset for England here, and they've picked him at the right time. All right, one more day of group stage T20 World Cup Daily on the final word. We're nearly there. We're having 2 days off, so to speak. I'm going to let my voice recover for 2 full days. I should go into like a
like a retreat.
Yeah, like a flotation tank.
Yeah, right. Or, the hyperbaric chamber. I think I read somewhere that you can get these humidity where you have humidifier, not the dehumidifier that you might get to fix your glass in the morning.
Right.
But a humidifier machine I can put over my head for a couple of days.
You should ask Mariah Carey. I bet she knows. She knows some tips for how to take care of the vocal cords.
Yeah.
That's it for us for today. We'll be back tomorrow. That's how a daily show works. It's every day that the World Cup is on. You can find us on patreon.com/thefinalword if you'd like to help us keep doing what we're doing. And aside from that, thanks to CBUS Super.
Making your hard work pay off.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Ta-da.